Still Snoop Dogg and D.I.
Hello and welcome to Villanova Tip Time. Today is Sunday, January 16th, and we are here for a little quick hitter episode of Villanova Tip Time ahead of Villanova's tip-off at the top of the hour at noon Eastern against as they welcome the Butler Bulldogs into the Wells Fargo Center. In an exciting day for the Nova Nation as they're back at the Wells Fargo Center for the first time in just about 2 years. First time since pre-pandemic. A lot of chatter on the Twitter sphere about being excited to have a Wells Fargo tailgate this morning. So we hope that everybody's out there enjoying themselves safely right now and gearing up for tip-off of this matchup, which will be, again, coming up at the top of the hour at noon Eastern. The first thing I think we want to talk about before we get into talking about what we saw from Nova Xavier earlier this week, introducing Butler, and then finally talking about the keys to today's game. The first thing that I want to make sure I cover is that the field in college basketball is absolutely wide open this year. We've seen a lot of a ring around the rosy at the top of the polls, if you will, where it looked like Baylor was the lone team that was really standing out above the pack. And this year, number one Baylor, previously undefeated, lost 2 games at home. So just goes to show you that a lot is going to change between now and tourney time, and I think you can expect to continue to see a sort of a carousel effect in this top 10 at the top of college basketball. Other notables was, and especially since I saw you last on Wednesday night, Oregon took down number 3 UCLA at UCLA in Pauley Pavilion on Thursday night in an overtime thriller. I think Texas Tech was probably the story of the week. Came into the week ranked 19th. They played 4 games in 8 days. In that span, they've taken down number 10 Kansas. That was actually when they were ranked 24th, I believe, last week. Bumped them up to the 19th ranking. Then they come in and they beat number 1 Baylor. They hand Baylor their first loss of the season at Baylor. Texas Tech notched another win against Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State, who then bounced back from that game and was the second team that beat Baylor this week. And then finally, Texas Tech lost last night to Kansas State. And again, what was their 4th game in 8 days? So you have to imagine that 19th ranking is going to jump up even higher and sort of discount that loss to Kansas State, because 4 games in 8 days is a lot of freaking games. The last game to call out is over in the SEC, where number 18 Kentucky was at home and absolutely dominated number 22 yesterday, 22 Tennessee, yesterday, beating them by like 30. Again, all just trends from the merry-go-round that is the top of college basketball, and this field is just feeling a lot more open than in previous years. And as I've said consistently, I think Villanova's underrated at number 14. So you have to like where the Nova Nation is sitting as we head into the crucial time of this season, gearing up for the tourney. Elsewhere in the Big East, the thing you want to call out is DePaul did beat number 20 Seton Hall on Thursday. That was at DePaul in Chicago. And then Seton Hall followed that up with a 1-point loss at Marquette yesterday. So this road trip for the Pirates to the upper Midwest over this long weekend has been quite unkind. I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention that the end of that Marquette-Seton Hall game, the referees literally handed that game to Marquette with just an awful, awful call with less than a few seconds on the clock. A Marquette shooter does a purely, sort of a spaz out last shot move where they created a lot of contact with the defender. Defender was just sort of standing there. Marquette dude jumped into him. Refs called it a foul, gave the game to Marquette. So really, really tough scene for the Big East refs. There's been a lot of chatter across Twitter, across college basketball Twitter, specifically Big East Twitter. And I know a lot of upset Villanova fans about the quality of the officiating that we've seen out of the Big East. It's not just happening in Nova games. It's happening across the landscape. And definitely something you want to keep an eye on, although Coach Wright is preaching to his team attitude. There's not much they can control about that. What they can control is their effort and their play. So it's important that we want to have our guys keeping that in mind. But it makes sense that the fans would be crying foul with the level of poor officiating that we've seen. So, alluding to Wednesday night's game and where I saw you last, let's talk a little bit about Villanova Xavier on Wednesday night from Cincinnati. So, Villanova's continuing a now 5 game winning streak coming today after that huge road win at number 17 Xavier on Wednesday. This game was never really a game until it was, when the Cats just went totally cold down the stretch. And after carrying a comfortable 12 to 17 point lead starting late in the mid first half, Xavier just kept chipping away, even tied the game with a few minutes left in the game. And Cats fans were feeling a very like ghost of Christmas past sort of vibe over both the UCLA and Purdue losses, where the Cats had those game in hand and then literally just stopped scoring. And that's kind of what happened here for a while in the, I think it was like roughly 10 minutes left in second half, down to like 2 minutes. Xavier just went on a ridiculous run that wasn't really all that impressive. It's not like Xavier was just playing amazing. The Cats just stopped scoring. And it was really, I think, tough for a lot of fans to watch until you realize, hey, we're in a close game against the number 17 team in the country, in an incredibly hostile road environment. And the Cats were able to pull it together and grind out the W in an incredibly tough road environment, as I've said. Credit's got to go to Justin Moore down the stretch, who just hit all of his free throws in crunch time. And if he hadn't hit those, this might have been a much different outcome that had us a lot more sad. Your 3 stars for the game are Colin Gillespie, Justin Moore, and Eric Dixon. Let's talk about each 3 of those guys for a second. So Colin Gillespie put up 21 points and had 3 boards and 2 assists, but it is worth mentioning that he did shoot 2 for 11 from 3, which is rough. His field goal percentage overall obviously took a hit for that. The team as a whole shot 20% for 3. The team shot 4 for 20. Definitely the most glaring stat there being Gillespie's 2 for 11, but Gillespie was still, he still contributed 21 points. So even on an off night from behind the arc, he found the way to get it done. He found a way to put up a nice stat line, and he found a way to lead his team to get that W on the road. Justin Moore was your second star of the game. He added 19 points. He was a much more confident, let's call it 2 for 4 from 3. And continues just a hot streak of increased level of play that we've seen from him over recent games. And then lastly, our third star of the game is going to be Eric Dixon, who added another 15-point performance against Xavier. Mind you, he had a very good game against Xavier at the Pavilion just before Christmas. And Eric Dixon continues to be the pleasant surprise for most Cats fan, as his level of play only seems to be increasing. You're going to see a nice test for him today against Butler with Bryce Enzi to being a good matchup for him. A good one-on-one matchup that hopefully will be a lot of fun for fans to watch. But the fact of the matter is, Eric Dixon was the third star of the game, having another really, really strong game against Xavier and being a force down the stretch, getting us a couple of nice buckets when we needed them in scoring droughts and what have you. So, with a few minutes left until the top of the hour and tip-off of this game, which will be on Fox Sports 1, let's talk a little bit about the Butler Bulldogs. The Bulldogs are 9-6 and 2-2 in the Big East. They are in the middle of what we would call a mediocre or a rebuilding year. They've lost all 4 of their ranked matchups by 15-plus points so far, and they're just a 1-5 against projected tournament teams. No matter what Butler's record are or how mediocre they are or not, it's always going to make me nervous to go into Hinkle Fieldhouse. So luckily for us, today is not that day. That game is coming up later in the season. Today we're in Philly. A little bit of a wild card that we're back at the Wells Fargo Center. I don't know that that's a better home court advantage for us than the Pavilion. Frankly, it's just not. That said, I think there's going to be a little extra juice to get on the NBA floor today and be back in front of those fans that are so excited to be back in the tailgating venue. So I'm hoping that provides our guys a little extra juice than it normally would. Still, the greater point here, I'm nervous as heck when we have to go play Butler, especially Butler in a down year even, at Hinkle Fieldhouse. Less nervous about today, although I will point out that Butler's lone win against the projected tournament team, remember I said they're 1-5, their lone win was at Oklahoma, which is a really tough road win and tough road environment. So to say that Butler can't win this game would certainly be a fallacy or a misgiving of the mind. The scoring load has been pretty balanced for Butler, with Bryce Golden, Chuck Harris, Jair Bolden, and Jaden Taylor all averaging within a half point of each other, right around 10 points a game. So I'm pretty much just rattling off the whole starting lineup as far as guys to know. And then the guy I mentioned earlier, Bryce Enzi, has only played about half of their games this year so far, but Cats know him as a solid contributor. And like I said, I think the Bryce Enzi Eric Dixon matchup will be a good sort of stepping stone, if you will, on the way to Eric Dixon's continued ascent. So now as we get down into real crunch time, and I want to make sure you have time to refill your beverage, although this time of day that beverage may very well be coffee. I want to give you time to refill the coffee and find your favorite spot for this game. Let's talk a little bit about the matchup highlights for this game and keys to the game. Funny enough, I wrote my talking points out. And then, one of the last things I do before I kind of consider my script good for the day is I go check, call it the Villanova content sphere for pre-game preview type of stuff. And it was interesting because my highlights and keys to the game today were very, very similar to VU Hoops game preview, which I highly recommend you all read before every game. Always a good sort of written word ability to get you up to speed. And I respect a lot of what they say over there. Coincidentally, today, the matchup and keys to the game that I wrote were very, very similar. Number one, shoot 'em up, sleep in the streets. When is this not a factor for Villanova or any team for that matter? The Cats were ice cold from three against Xavier. They were 4 for 20 overall, like I mentioned a moment ago. Butler does defend the three well. So even if this year's Butler team isn't a big perimeter threat themselves, forcing another cold performance from the Cats behind the arc seems like Butler's best opportunity to make some magic happen for themselves today. So you'd love to see Villanova get hot on the NBA floor. Secondary. Coach Wright says the Cats are at full strength finally, but are they? Slater and Samuels are both coming off one of their worst games of the year against Xavier on Wednesday with 3 and 0 points respectively, and both fouling out. Both have been dealing with nagging injuries that Nova Nation wants to see improvement from, for just simply for these guys, because it's clear that both Slater and Samuels, when hurt, not able to contribute at the same level that we've seen from both of them at times this season. So Coach says the Cats are, quote, finally healthy, or something like that. I don't know the exact quote in his media availability over the last couple days. He says they're finally healthy coming into today's game. Let's hope it stays that way, because it's going to be, I think it's going to just be more exciting for Cats fans to see what the true ceiling for this team is when we have the whole team at full strength. Earlier in the year we didn't have Brian Anton and the rotation was really light. Now we've got a more full rotation, but we've got starters that are dealing with injuries. So it's going to be nice to see the Cats able to put it all together when they can really, truly finally have everybody healthy. The last and final key to the game here is going to be to tighten up on the turnovers. The Xavier game was sloppy at times, and it was made worse by questionable officiating that compounded the issues. Yes, I'm looking at the travel call against Caleb Daniels when he was absolutely steamrolled over, and they somehow inexplicably called it a travel. That said, there were, I think, 4 travels called in that game, all of which were questionable calls. There were a number of backcourt violations, none of which were questionable calls. They were just throwaways. So the game was sloppy. The questionable officiating only compounded these issues. And you want to see this team tighten that up, because Butler does play pretty good defense. They've had a really tough strength of schedule that they've played that good defense against, and they do a good job at creating turnovers. So Villanova, don't help them out. Let's tighten it up with the ball. And you have to figure Coach is going to go with his super senior leader, Colin Gillespie, to set the tone here and really focus in and have a less sloppy effort out there team-wide as far as turnovers go against Butler. So with that, we're right at the top of the hour, and I'm officially going to bid you adieu here as we settle in for this game against the Butler Bulldogs from the Wells Fargo Center. Ladies and gentlemen, it's tip time.